So I thought I recorded this the first time, but I apparently streamed it to a website that I used before, but it didn't record it. So this is going to be take two. So hopefully I don't forget anything. But anyway, I started my social justice project. Wanted to talk about inclusion and self-containment, the two sort of theories behind them. And originally, I thought that I was going to kind of compare and contrast them, um, and ultimately find that inclusion was always the best way to go, no matter what, always, forever. Um, but that wasn't actually the case. So I'll go ahead and talk about what I found. So first, inclusion, as it says, the idea that all students participate in the same environment. You pretty much um, do away with the normal separation of special ed and general ed. Um, but the teachers that I talked to and some of the articles that I read really emphasized the fact that it wasn't just the students kind of being dumped into the classroom. It was the students being a part of the classroom. They were adding to it. They're not being thrown into it. It was important that all the children there felt valued and felt like they were really part of the classroom. So that was kind of the main idea there. Self-containment. These are classrooms that are, as it says, contained. The idea behind these is to assist students um, that that need the same services or have some of the same struggles or are on the same academic level. The difference here between inclusion and this really depends a lot on the services that a school district or classroom can provide, or school, I mean, classroom, excuse me. Because in order for these services, typically it's a little more difficult and expensive for the services to be provided in a main or in an inclusive classroom versus in a self-contained classroom where many of the students share a lot of the same disabilities or struggles. Now the students' level of self-containment, it could be completely self-contained, partially self-contained, really depends on the decisions of the individualized education plan team and that EPU team, and what their goals are for the students' interaction with the general ed population. So as I was going through my research, this word came up, mainstreaming, and it's a word that I've used frequently as an interpreter, but we use it a little bit differently. As an interpreter, we typically use this word to mean deaf students that are being educated in a public school, because historically deaf children were sent to residential schools, specifically for the deaf. I guess a completely self-contained school, I guess, in that sense, sort of. But as students started to enroll in public schools through IDEA and the idea behind the least restrictive environment and stuff like that, PL 94-142. Anyway, the idea of inclusion sort of sparked this term mainstreaming in the interpreter and deaf community. The interviews I did with a couple of the special ed teachers I worked with, they were using this word, and it didn't feel like it meant to them what it meant to me. So I specifically did some research on this, and what I found is that it's pretty different from the way I use it. First, as it says, it's not the same as inclusion. The idea here for mainstreaming is a student will have a special ed classroom that's sort of like their homeroom, and then throughout the day, with the use of extensive support and aids and accommodations, the student will spend a varying amount of time in general ed classrooms, and that amount of time will also depend on the student. And that was kind of the underlying I guess, characteristic of all of these is that there are certainly pros and cons to each, and I think each has been argued for a long time. But what it seemed to come down to for all of them is it really depended on the individual, it depended on the school, it was dependent on the district and the classroom, and so all of these factors kind of went into what was best. And the more I thought about it, the more that kind of makes sense because I went into this thinking that I was going to be able to figure out which one was better and take this sort of one of the ideas, either inclusion or self-containment, and sort of project it onto all these students when in fact the best environment, the least restrictive environment, is really going to depend on the decisions of the IEP team, what they think is best for the student, what the student thinks is best for the student in some cases. Um, so that was kind of the common theme there, is that there isn't really a great answer because it's going to depend on a lot of things. And one of the other things I wanted to bring up as I was making this PowerPoint and doing all that, I came across this picture and I decided to put this in here because I wanted to kind of go off on a tangent. Actually, it's not really a segue into something that I think is kind of interesting and something to think about. Oh, before I do, I totally forgot. I did forget a part that I mentioned the first time I recorded this. So let me back up. I'm really sorry. Time out. Back up. Okay. So again, depends on the student. One of the other things that isn't mentioned a lot in the papers I read, and I don't think it was mentioned at all in the interviews that I did with the two special ed teachers at the school that I work at, but I feel that these inclusion classrooms, or having the students working with the general ed population, certainly can be a benefit to those students, but I don't think it's mentioned enough that it's a benefit to the general ed population as well. I think we learn a lot from working with people that aren't like us, and I think that's true of any situation. I went to a decent sized elementary school. I guess it was kind of on the small side, but didn't really have a significant interaction with the special ed population there at all that I can remember really. In middle school, I went to a pretty big middle school. Again, no interaction that I can recall with the special ed population in my classrooms. Just a very standard middle school, I think. And then I decided to go to a really, really small high school, 200 students. I think my graduating class was like 23 students. What was unique about this school, though, is that 50% of the population was special ed. Originally, it was a completely self-contained school. It was 100% special ed. And then due to the desegregation laws, from the suit filed against the 275 school district a long time ago, ordered them to desegregate the school, and that included the special ed schools. And so I enrolled in the school, and what was really, really cool about the school is that my freshman year, all freshmen were required to take a class, and the class was sort of like an aid, but really we would just go into the special ed classrooms and we would work with the students and just get to know them, and it was a fantastic experience. And I'm really happy that one of my elective courses, one of my elective credits was not an elective for me, but I think was a really good decision because I feel like I learned more about myself and how I interact with people, and how I need to sort of self-monitor how I act with people, and this gave me an opportunity to work with lots of different people and reflect on how I felt and reflect on how I treated people, and really gave me a unique opportunity to learn about that, an opportunity that I'm not sure I would have gotten in a normal high school, or the typical high school. And I think it sort of eased the process of inclusion for the other students as well. When a lot of times I think that I imagine that at some point in my elementary and middle school careers that there would have been some inclusion, but I'm sure what happened is that the student was put in the classroom, but that they may not necessarily have felt like they were a part of the classroom. Whereas at the school I went to, the high school I went to, I do feel like when these students were in the classroom, that they were part of the classroom, and I can vividly remember the classes that students from special ed classrooms would come into and work with us and do the work that we were doing. And I think it was great. I think the benefit was as much for us as it was for the students that were in the self-contained, or that were in the special ed classrooms, so I just thought that wasn't, I just don't think it's mentioned enough, the benefit so somewhat like kind of a conclusion, important thing we kind of talked a lot was the individualized education plan, the IEP and the IEP team, the least restrictive environment, what's best for this student, and what resources are available to the school, the district, and the team itself. Because ultimately, again, like I said, there isn't a one-size-fits-all answer to this, which is better. It's really going to depend on what's best for the student, and that's not going to be an easy answer anytime. I think just as an IEP team, we have to come together and really discuss and think about what's best for that student and make a decision based on that. But yeah, so that's my social justice project. I really feel like I came a long way from my kind of ignorant idea, I guess, that there was going to be a one size fit to it, when in fact there wasn't. But it was good. I think it's something that it's important that I learned, especially for someone who's been in the realm of special ed for a long time. Well, 5 years is a long time for me, or 6 years is a long time for me. But just another thing to think about, and I think it's just something else that I can